I always thought the rooftop was the best part of the restaurant. Even when the wind tried to play with the napkins and the city hummed like a faraway engine, up there the night felt honest. You could see the skyline wrap itself in light, hear the clink of glasses, smell the butter and thyme from the kitchen vents. It made even tired feet and a thin paycheck feel almost glamorous. Almost. I was on my fourth table when he arrived. A man in a charcoal suit with the kind of stillness that makes a room adjust itself. He did not check his phone. He did not scan for anyone he knew. He took a corner table and gave me a small nod, like we had a secret I was about to learn. "Good evening," I said, balancing the tray against my hip. "Still or sparkling?" "Still, please," he said. His voice was calm, the kind that stays the same whether it is midnight or morning. I brought the water and the menu, and he looked at neither. He looked at me. Not in the way some men do, like they are tallying a tip in advance. In a way that said he was actually paying attention. "What do you recommend?" "The seared scallops," I said. "And the corn risotto. If you like something brighter, the citrus salad is good." "Then that," he said. "All of it." A small smile almost found me. I wrote fast, dropped the ticket, and tried not to think about the suit and the watch that caught the candlelight like a small comet. It was easy to pretend people like him were part of the furniture. It was easier to pretend my life was not 2 bus rides and a rented room with a window that opened only if you begged it. By the time I brought his plates, the air had cooled. A quartet below sent soft notes into the night. He watched me set everything down with the care of someone who respects small rituals. "Thank you," he said. "What is your name?" "Emily." "I am Ethan," he said, like the name belonged to the skyline. I tried to move on, but table 6 decided to make a scene. A man with too much wine and not enough manners waved me over with 2 fingers. "Where is the other bottle?" he slurred. "We ordered it an hour ago." "You ordered it 9 minutes ago," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It is on the way." He smirked and leaned in too close. "Maybe it is on the way if you bring it faster." Then his hand brushed my wrist in the kind of mistake that is never a mistake. I pulled back. "I will get your bottle, sir." He reached again. Ethan stood. It was not loud. He did not raise his voice. He only stepped between us like a door that had decided to lock. "That is enough," he told the man. "You will speak to her like a person or you will speak to a manager. Your choice." The man laughed. One quick bark that died on its own. He looked at Ethan, saw something he could not argue with, and slumped back into his chair. "Fine. Whatever. Just bring the wine." I exhaled in a slow thread. "Thank you," I said to Ethan. His eyes moved to mine for a second longer than polite. "I have no patience for men who mistake service for permission," he said. "Are you all right?" I nodded and walked away before the tremor in my hands could give me away. In the kitchen, I leaned against the stainless steel counter until the cold seeped through the cotton of my sleeve. The chef slid a plate toward me with a glance that asked if I needed a minute. I shook my head. Out I went, back into the music and the glass and the city that glittered like it had no idea how small I felt. When I returned to Ethan's table, he had finished the scallops and left the risotto barely touched. "Is it not good?" I asked. "It is very good," he said. "I am not hungry for food." "What are you hungry for?" His smile was more thought than mouth. "Conversation. The kind that is not on the menu." I laughed before I could stop it, and the sound surprised me. I had not heard myself laugh like that in months. I poured more water. "What do you want to talk about?" He tilted his head as if measuring a distance. "Tell me one true thing about yourself, Emily." I considered lies that sounded like truths. I chose the opposite. "My mother collects broken cups and glues them back together. She says things can be whole in more than one way." He watched me as if I had handed him a map. "Tell me another." "No," I said, feeling suddenly lighter. "Now you." He did not look away from me when he answered. "I am not here to be seen. I am here to see." Before I could ask what that meant, the manager appeared to tell me a party had doubled and needed another place setting. The moment folded itself away. I moved through the rest of the shift in clean lines and practiced smiles, and every time I glanced toward the corner, Ethan was there, a fixed star in the room's small sky. At closing, I found him at the railing, looking over the city like he was reading a letter. The tables were cleared, the candles blown out, the night settling its weight. He turned when he heard my steps. "Walk with me," he said. I should have said no. I should have said my bus would not wait. Instead, I nodded. We crossed the empty dining room and rode the quiet elevator to the street. He did not offer his arm. He did not talk at first. We walked 2 blocks to where the city softened into a small park with a fountain that shone like a coin. He stopped beneath a lamppost and faced me. "I do not usually do this," he said. "Do what?" "Make an offer without a preface. But here it is. Have dinner with me tomorrow." "Not here. Somewhere no one knows my name." "Why?" "Because tonight I saw a woman who keeps her balance when men try to tip the world. Because you told me 2 true things. Because I have my own truths, and I am not sure what to do with them yet." I looked at the gold circle of light that held us and the dark city that waited beyond it. I heard the water and the traffic and my own heart finding a new rhythm. "Say yes," the part of me that loved risk whispered. "Say no," the part that loved rent and safety replied. I took a breath to choose. And then a car rolled to the curb, a black window sliding down just enough for a face to appear. A woman's voice, smooth as a blade, cut through the night. "Do not get in his car, Emily." Ethan's jaw tightened. The woman's eyes met mine with a familiarity I could not place and a warning I could not ignore. The engine idled. The fountain whispered. My yes balanced on the edge of my tongue. The woman's face disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. The tinted window slid back up, sealing away whatever message she thought she had delivered. The car pulled away, its taillights vanishing into the darkness like a warning swallowed by the city. Ethan didn't speak. He just stood there beneath the lamppost, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "Who was that?" I finally asked, my voice lower than I intended. He exhaled slowly, his gaze fixed on the space where the car had been. "No one you need to worry about." "That's not an answer," I said. "And yet, it's all you're getting for now," he replied, his tone calm but final. The night air felt heavier after that. We started walking again, the silence between us stretching thin. At the corner, he stopped. "My offer still stands," he said, turning toward me. "Dinner. Tomorrow night. Somewhere private." I crossed my arms. "Why me, Ethan? You could ask anyone." A faint smile ghosted over his lips. "Because you're not like anyone. And because I think you'd understand things other people wouldn't." It sounded cryptic, almost rehearsed, but something in his eyes made me think he meant it. That same part of me that had said say yes back at the fountain spoke again, louder this time. Against my better judgment, I nodded. "Tomorrow night," I said. "Good," he replied, and without another word, he hailed a cab for me. When I climbed in, he closed the door himself, like a gentleman from another era. I watched him through the window until the cab turned and he disappeared from view. The next day at work, I kept replaying the night in my head, the way he had stood up for me, the way he had looked at me, the way that woman had warned me. I told myself I wasn't going to get swept up in whatever storm he carried with him, but curiosity gnawed at me like a stubborn tide. By the time my shift ended, I was both nervous and strangely excited. Ethan was waiting for me outside, leaning against a sleek black car that didn't belong in my part of town. He wasn't wearing a suit this time, just a dark sweater and a coat that made him look almost approachable. Almost. "You ready?" he asked. Depends on where we're going, I said, tugging my scarf tighter. You'll see, he replied, holding the door open. The drive took us out of the city center, past familiar streets into quieter neighborhoods. Finally, we stopped in front of a small, hidden restaurant tucked behind a row of tall hedges. No sign, no lights in the windows, just a single lantern by the door. Inside, the air was warm, the lighting low and golden. Only a handful of tables filled the space, each one draped in white linen and set with flickering candles. It was the kind of place that didn't exist on Google Maps, the kind of place you only found if someone wanted you to. Over dinner, we talked. Not about him, which I was beginning to realize was deliberate, but about me. He asked questions no one ever asked. What I dreamed about when I was 16, what my happiest memory was, what I feared losing the most. At first, I deflected. But slowly, I found myself telling him things I hadn't told anyone in years, about my mother and her broken teacups, about my first job, about the night I decided to leave home for good. When I finally turned the questions on him, he gave answers that were like doors half opened, enough to glimpse something inside, but never enough to step through. It wasn't until dessert arrived, an espresso and a slice of something chocolate and decadent, that he said something that froze me. What if I told you, he began, his voice steady, that I'm looking for someone to marry me? I blinked. Excuse me. I'm not joking, he said, leaning back in his chair. It wouldn't be for love. Not yet, anyway. It would be an arrangement. For reasons I can't tell you now. I laughed, thinking he was teasing, but his face didn't change. You're serious, I said. Very, he replied. And I think you might be the right person. The air between us felt suddenly different, heavier, like we had just stepped into a conversation that could change everything. Why me? I asked again, my voice almost a whisper. His eyes didn't leave mine. Because you're not afraid to tell the truth. And because I think you're running from something, just like I am. The candlelight flickered between us, painting shadows on the tablecloth. Outside, the wind rattled the branches against the windows, and I knew the answer I gave next would decide whether this was just a strange dinner or the start of something I couldn't undo. I wish I could say I took a week to think about it, that I made a list of pros and cons, weighed every possible outcome, and chose with the cool logic of someone who knows exactly what they're doing. But the truth? I said yes 2 nights later. Ethan didn't push. He didn't call or text me every hour, demanding an answer. He simply left me with a thought, like a seed, and let it grow in the quiet spaces of my mind. By the second night, it had bloomed into something I couldn't ignore. When I told him my decision, his only response was a slow nod. Good, he said. Then we move fast. I didn't realize he meant immediately. The next morning, he picked me up before sunrise. I didn't even have time to grab coffee before we were on the highway, the city shrinking behind us. I asked where we were going, but he only said, somewhere private. We drove for hours until the buildings gave way to trees, and the smell of salt began to thread through the air. Eventually, we turned onto a narrow road that led to a cliffside estate overlooking the ocean. It wasn't ostentatious, but every inch of it whispered wealth, the kind that didn't need to be loud. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lavender and sea air. In the main room, 2 strangers waited, a man in a navy suit holding a leather-bound folder and a woman in a pale dress with a clipboard. Emily, Ethan said, his voice calm. This is Judge Reynolds. And this is Marianne. She'll be our witness, along with the groundskeeper. My pulse quickened. You mean now? Now, he said simply. It happened in a blur. The judge asked if we were ready, and Ethan's gaze locked on mine like he was steadying me through some invisible storm. I said, I do, before I could talk myself out of it, my voice catching on the words. He said, I do, without hesitation. There were no flowers, no music, no crowd to watch. Just the 4 of us in a sunlit room with the ocean visible through the tall windows. When it was over, the judge closed the folder, the witnesses signed, and just like that, I was married. Ethan stepped closer, taking my hands. "For what it's worth," he murmured, "I'm glad it's you." It might have been the salt in the air, but I felt something in my chest loosen. We shared a kiss, not passionate, not staged, but something quiet and deliberate. A promise of something, though I didn't yet know what. The moment broke when Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and in that instant, his expression shifted. The warmth faded, replaced by the sharp focus I'd seen in him that first night. "I have to take this," he said, stepping away. He moved toward the far end of the room, speaking low enough that I couldn't hear. But I caught fragments, my name, something about "not yet," and a tone that carried both warning and command. When he came back, his face was unreadable again. "We'll head back tomorrow," he said. "Tonight, just rest." I wanted to ask who had called. I wanted to demand answers. But instead, I found myself staring out at the ocean, wondering what exactly I had just stepped into, and why I couldn't shake the feeling that the real reason for this marriage was still waiting, just out of reach. And somewhere deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The drive back to the city felt longer than the trip to the coast, even though we took the same road. Maybe it was because everything looked different now. Every mile bringing me closer to a new life I wasn't entirely sure I'd chosen for the right reasons. Ethan didn't talk much. He asked if I was comfortable, if I wanted to stop for coffee, but otherwise kept his eyes on the road. I kept sneaking glances at him, wondering if this was how he was with everyone, calm, distant, impossible to read, or if it was just with me. When we finally pulled up to his building, I almost laughed. Calling it a building didn't do it justice. It was a glass and steel tower with a lobby big enough to hold the entire restaurant I used to work in, lit by a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a museum. The doorman greeted him by name. He glanced at me with polite curiosity before pressing the elevator button. The penthouse was overwhelming. Floor-to-ceiling windows, polished marble floors, furniture so sleek it looked like it had been placed there for a magazine shoot. The view stretched across the entire city, the river cutting through it like a silver ribbon. "This is yours?" I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. He nodded. "Ours now." I set my bag down on the couch, afraid to touch anything. There were no family photos, no personal clutter, just art on the walls and books stacked neatly on low shelves. It felt like a place someone lived in without actually living. "Do you live here alone?" I asked. "Yes," he said, then added, "until now." We spent the afternoon in separate corners of the penthouse. He worked in an office with glass walls, speaking in low, deliberate tones on the phone. I wandered from room to room, learning the space like I might learn a person, tracing the clean lines, noticing the absence of warmth, the way everything felt curated. That night, he insisted on taking me to a private dinner with a few of his business associates. The restaurant was hidden behind an unmarked door in the financial district, the kind of place where the menu didn't list prices and the waiters seemed to glide instead of walk. When we arrived, all eyes turned to us. A tall man with silver hair stood to shake Ethan's hand. "Ethan," he said warmly, "and this must be my wife," Ethan said smoothly. "Emily." The word wife landed heavy, like a stone thrown into still water. I felt the ripple through the room. They smiled, they shook my hand, but I could see it, the flicker of surprise, the unspoken questions. Who is she? Where did she come from? Why her? I tried to focus on the food, the wine, the conversations about markets and investments I barely understood. But between sips, I caught snippets that weren't meant for me. Didn't know he'd married. She's not from our circle. Wonder how long it will last. When the dinner ended, we walked out into the cool night air. Ethan's hand rested lightly on my back, guiding me toward the car. "Don't listen to them," he said quietly, as if he could read my thoughts. "They don't matter." "Then who does?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment before answering. Me. And you. That's it. But later, as I lay awake in the massive bed, I heard him in the office again, his voice low, urgent. And though I couldn't make out the words, I caught one sentence as clear as glass. Keep her hidden. For now. The shadows in the room seemed to stretch closer after that, and I wondered if I had just married a man who didn't plan to keep me in the light at all. The next morning, Ethan was already gone when I woke up. A note sat on the kitchen counter in his precise handwriting. Breakfast is in the fridge. I'll be back late. I stared at it for a long time, the neat loops and sharp lines of his letters making me feel like I was looking at something that belonged to a stranger. I spent the day exploring the city, mostly to escape the feeling that the penthouse was swallowing me whole. Without Ethan beside me, the marble floors and silent hallways seemed colder, the windows too big, the view too distant. I wandered through streets I knew from before, places where no one cared who I was or who I had married. I bought coffee from a cart, let the steam warm my hands, and walked until my feet hurt. That's when I saw him. Liam. He was leaning against the wall outside a bookstore, his hair a little longer than I remembered, his smile exactly the same. Emily, he called, straightening when he saw me. No way. It's been, 3 years? I forced a smile. Something like that. He walked closer, his eyes scanning me in that way old friends do when they're trying to fit the pieces together. You look different. New job, I said quickly. New life. Yeah. He tilted his head. Well, I almost didn't recognize you. He stopped, the next words dying on his tongue. Wait. Should I say Emily? My stomach tightened. What do you mean? But before he could answer, I heard a voice behind me, smooth, unfamiliar, and too close. Everything okay here? I turned to find one of Ethan's drivers standing there, dressed in a black suit, eyes scanning the street like he was on guard duty. Yeah, I said, forcing another smile. Just catching up with an old friend. The driver's gaze didn't waver from Liam. Mr. Hayes wanted me to find you. The car's waiting. I glanced at Liam. His expression had shifted, confused, maybe even a little hurt. Guess that's my ride, I said, stepping back. Right, he said, his voice softer now. Good seeing you. Emily. The way he said my name told me he hadn't forgotten the other one. Back at the penthouse, the evening air was thick with the smell of roasted garlic and herbs. Ethan was in the kitchen, a bottle of wine open on the counter. You went out alone, he said without looking up. I needed some air, I replied. I ran into someone I used to know. He poured 2 glasses, his movements deliberate. What did they say? Just hello. His eyes lifted to mine, and I realized he didn't believe me. Emily, there are people who might try to use you to get to me. You understand that, right? I bristled. I'm not a liability, Ethan. I didn't say you were, he said evenly. I'm just saying, be careful who you talk to. We ate in near silence after that, but the image of Liam's face wouldn't leave my mind, especially the moment he almost called me by a name I thought I'd buried for good. And when I went to bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the life I'd left behind was starting to catch up with me, and it might be faster than I could run. 3 nights later, Ethan took me to a charity gala at one of the city's most opulent hotels. The kind of place where crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling like frozen rain and the champagne never stopped flowing. I wore a sleek black dress he had sent to the penthouse earlier that day, along with a note in his familiar handwriting. You'll look perfect in this. For the first hour, everything was smooth. I played the part, smiling at strangers, shaking hands with people who had more commas in their bank accounts than I'd ever seen. Ethan stayed close, one hand at the small of my back, guiding me through conversations as if we'd been doing this for years. And then she arrived. Vanessa. I didn't know her name at first, but the way the crowd shifted told me she was someone who drew attention without trying. She was tall, impossibly poised, and wearing a dress that seemed painted onto her body. Her lipstick matched the deep red of the wine in her glass, and her eyes, sharp and assessing, locked on Ethan the second she spotted him. "Ethan," she purred as she approached, her voice dripping with familiarity. "It's been too long." He smiled politely, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Vanessa." "And you must be—" She turned to me, letting her gaze sweep over me in a way that felt like being weighed and measured. "The new wife." "Emily," I said, forcing a smile. "Emily," she repeated, as if tasting the name. "Well, aren't you a surprise?" She took a sip of her wine, never breaking eye contact. "I have to admit, I didn't think you were Ethan's type." My smile didn't falter. "And what type is that?" Her lips curved in a way that told me she thought she'd already won. "The kind who can keep up." The words were meant to sting, but instead they lit a spark in me. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "I guess we'll just have to see how long I last, won't we?" For the first time, her smile twitched. Just barely, but I saw it. Ethan excused us soon after, leading me toward a quieter corner. "You didn't have to engage her," he said under his breath. "I wasn't about to let her walk all over me," I replied. His jaw tightened, but there was something else in his eyes, something like approval. "Vanessa can be unpredictable. Just stay clear of her." The rest of the night passed in a blur of small talk and polite laughter. But as we were leaving, I caught sight of Vanessa standing near the exit, her phone pressed to her ear, her gaze fixed on me. And when our eyes met, she mouthed two words I couldn't hear but understood perfectly. "I know." Later, at the penthouse, Ethan stepped out to take a call. I was about to pour myself a glass of water when I heard his voice, low, tense, from the other room. "Vanessa, I told you before, this isn't your business." "No. You don't know her like I do. That's enough. Stay out of it." The call ended, but the unease it left behind didn't. I had no idea what Vanessa thought she knew about me, but I had a feeling it wasn't going to stay a secret for long. And if she was planning to tell Ethan, I wasn't sure I was ready for what would happen next. I woke the next morning to the buzzing of my phone on the nightstand. At first, I thought it was an alarm, but when I reached for it, I saw Liam's name flashing across the screen. I hesitated before answering. "Hello." "Emily," he said quickly, his voice urgent. "You need to see what's online." "What?" "Check the Herald. The Society column. It's about you." The call ended before I could ask anything else. My chest tightened as I opened the browser and searched. It didn't take long to find. Mystery woman marries Ethan Hayes. But who is she? Below the headline was a grainy photo of me at the gala, Vanessa just behind me. The article didn't use my real name, at least, not the one Ethan knew. But it dropped enough hints about my past that anyone who had known me before could piece it together. There it was. My family's last name. The old one. The one I had left behind when I walked away from that life. The piece was ruthless, spinning the story like I had manipulated Ethan into marriage. It even dredged up the scandal from years ago, the one that had pushed me to leave everything. The affair. The whispers. The headlines that had made my mother stop leaving the house. I felt sick. My hands trembled as I shut the laptop. By the time Ethan came into the kitchen, I had poured myself 2 cups of coffee just to have something to do. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked without preamble. I looked up sharply. "You've seen it." "I've had calls all morning," he said, setting his phone on the counter. "Business associates. Friends. Everyone suddenly thinks they know you." "Do they?" I asked bitterly. He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "You could have told me about your family, about the scandal, about all of it." And would you have married me if I had? I shot back. His jaw tightened. This isn't about me. Yes, it is, I said, my voice shaking now. Because the moment you found out I wasn't just some poor waitress, you'd have looked at me differently. And I didn't want that. He was silent for a long moment. Finally, he asked quietly, was any of it true? The affair? No. That was my father. The cover-up? My mother. The reason I left? Because I didn't want to become them. Something shifted in his expression, something between understanding and frustration. You still should have told me. And you should have told me why you wanted to marry me, I countered. His eyes narrowed. You wouldn't have said yes. We stood there, staring at each other, two people bound by a marriage that was beginning to feel like it had been built on quicksand. Before either of us could speak again, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and swore under his breath. What? I asked. It's Vanessa, he said grimly. And something tells me she's the one who handed this story to the press. The thought made my stomach twist. If Vanessa knew enough to leak my past, she probably wasn't done yet. And whatever she had planned next, I had the awful feeling it was going to be worse. Ethan didn't answer Vanessa's call. He let it ring out, then slid the phone onto the counter like it was something poisonous. Whatever she's doing, he said, we're not playing into it. But I could tell by the tension in his jaw that ignoring her wasn't an option. Later that afternoon, while Ethan was in his office on another call, I decided I needed air. I walked to a small cafe a few blocks from the penthouse, one I used to pass before my life had changed. It was quiet, the kind of place where no one cared who you were. Or so I thought. I had just sat down with my coffee when a shadow fell across my table. Mind if I join you? I looked up to find Vanessa standing there, dressed in a cream coat that probably cost more than I'd made in 6 months at the restaurant. Not really, I said flatly. She smiled like she'd been expecting that. Oh, I think you'll want to hear what I have to say. I said nothing, and she slid into the chair opposite me anyway. You've caused quite the stir, she began, stirring sugar into a cup she hadn't ordered. People love a mystery, but they love tearing one apart even more. Is that why you ran to the press? I asked. Her smile widened. You think I'd admit to that? Cute. I took a slow sip of my coffee. What do you want, Vanessa? She leaned forward, her perfume wrapping around the table. Ethan isn't the man you think he is. And you, well, you're not exactly the innocent little Cinderella he's selling, are you? My fingers tightened around the cup. I'm not pretending to be anything I'm not. She said, tilting her head. See, I think you are. And sooner or later, Ethan's going to realize it. When he does, I want to be there to watch it happen. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. She stood, dropping a folded piece of paper onto the table. Call me when you're ready to know what he's hiding. When she was gone, I hesitated before opening it. On the paper was an address and a date. Tomorrow night. Back at the penthouse, I hid the note in my bag. I didn't tell Ethan about running into her. Not because I trusted Vanessa, but because some part of me wanted to know if she was bluffing. That night, as Ethan poured me a glass of wine, he asked, You were gone a while today. Where'd you go? Just walked, I said, keeping my voice even. He didn't press. But as we ate dinner, I couldn't stop thinking about that address, and whether going there would ruin everything or finally show me the truth. And deep down, I already knew I was going. The next day dragged like wet wool. Ethan left early for meetings, and the penthouse felt more like a cage than a home. Every time I glanced at my bag, I thought about the folded note inside. By late afternoon, the curiosity had turned into something sharper, an ache in my chest that wouldn't let me sit still. I left without telling anyone. No driver, no security. Just me, a coat, and the address in my pocket. It was on the other side of the city, in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. Older, quieter, with narrow streets lined by brick buildings that had seen better decades. The address led me to a townhouse, its windows dark, its paint peeling. I knocked once. No answer. I was about to leave when the door opened a fraction, and a man's voice said, "You're early." It wasn't Vanessa. The door opened wider to reveal a man in his 40s, tall, with eyes the same cold gray as Ethan's. He looked me over, taking in my hesitation. "You're her," he said, not as a question. "Come in." The air inside was warm but smelled faintly of dust. The living room was sparse, just a couch, a coffee table, and a stack of old newspapers in the corner. He gestured for me to sit. "Vanessa said you'd want the truth. I'm guessing she didn't tell you she's my sister." That hit like a stone to the chest. "She didn't mention that," I said carefully. He smirked. "Figures. She likes to play her own games. But I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to tell you what Ethan's not telling you." My pulse quickened. "Which is?" He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "You think Ethan married you because of some whirlwind romance? No. He married you because he needed someone without ties. Someone no one in his world could trace. He's hiding money, Emily. Moving it. Your name, your clean public slate, makes you the perfect cover." I stared at him, my mind struggling to keep up. That doesn't make sense. If he wanted someone invisible, why not hire someone? "Because the law doesn't look as hard at a wife," he said simply. "A wife can move things, sign things, open accounts, without raising red flags." I shook my head. "No, Ethan's not." But even as I said it, my thoughts went back to all the times he'd been vague, all the closed-door phone calls, all the warnings to stay out of sight. The man sat back. "You don't have to believe me. But think about this. Why hasn't he told you what he actually does for a living?" I left without saying goodbye, the cold air biting harder than when I'd arrived. By the time I reached the penthouse, Ethan was home. He was in the kitchen, casually slicing bread, but when he saw me, his expression shifted. "Where were you?" he asked, his tone too calm. "Out," I said. His eyes narrowed. "With who?" "No one," I replied, forcing my voice to stay steady. For a moment, we just stared at each other, both of us holding something back. Then he smiled, too quickly, and said, "Dinner's almost ready." But the warmth in his voice didn't reach his eyes. And I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe Vanessa's brother was right. Maybe I'd been brought into this marriage for reasons I was never meant to understand. Dinner was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence where every clink of cutlery sounded like a gunshot. Ethan asked me about my day, the kind of small talk that felt almost rehearsed, but I kept my answers short. My mind was still at that peeling townhouse, replaying every word Vanessa's brother had said. Halfway through the meal, I couldn't take it anymore. "Ethan," I said, setting down my fork, "what do you actually do for a living?" He didn't look up from his plate. "You know what I do." "I know what you say you do," I replied. "Business deals, investments, meetings. But those aren't answers. I'm your wife, and I don't even know the truth." He finally met my eyes, his gaze sharp enough to cut. "Why are you asking me this now?" I hesitated. "Because someone told me you married me for a reason that had nothing to do with us." His jaw tightened. "Who told you that? Does it matter?" I asked. "It matters," he said, his voice low, "because the people feeding you lies are the same ones who would love to see me, and now you destroyed." "Then prove them wrong," I challenged. "Tell me." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he stood, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights reflected off his profile, turning his expression unreadable. I can't tell you everything, he said finally. Not yet. But you need to trust me when I say I'm protecting you. My chest tightened. Protecting me from what? From the people who think they can use you to get to me, he said, turning toward me. Vanessa, her brother, and anyone else who smells blood in the water. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to hold on to the quiet moments we'd shared, the ones that made me think this marriage could be more than an arrangement. But his refusal to give me a straight answer felt like a wall I couldn't climb. Later that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Ethan worked in his office. The low murmur of his voice on another call drifted through the hall, but I couldn't make out the words. Then I heard it, clear enough to freeze me in place. She doesn't know, he said. A pause. And she won't until I'm ready. I closed my eyes, my heart pounding. Whatever game Ethan was playing, I wasn't just part of it. I was at the center. And the worst part was, I didn't know if I wanted out. The city was quiet that night, the kind of quiet that feels unnatural, as if the streets themselves were holding their breath. Ethan had gone to bed hours ago, his breathing slow and even beside me, but I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling back to the phone call I'd overheard, those words that now sat like stones in my chest. She doesn't know. And she won't until I'm ready. At 12:07 a.m., the sound came. A knock. Soft at first, almost polite. Then again, firmer. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him, and padded to the door in bare feet. Through the peephole, the hallway looked empty. But when I opened the door, a single envelope lay on the floor, thick and cream-colored, sealed with deep red wax. No return address. No name. Just a single line in elegant handwriting across the front. You deserve to know the truth. My pulse thundered as I slid my thumb under the seal. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, black and white, but unmistakable. It was Ethan, standing beside Vanessa's brother, shaking hands over a briefcase. And in the corner of the photo, blurred but visible, was my own face, watching from the background. The envelope slipped from my fingers, landing silently on the floor. Behind me, I heard movement. Ethan's voice, low and wary. Emily, what are you doing? I turned slowly, the photo still in my hand. And in his eyes, I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear.